basic idea of what these events are about so we can kind of get that out of the way and spend the majority of the time doing what we want to, which is speaking with Kyle tonight. So as far as these events go, if you're new here, this is your first event. Typically what we like to do is we do these twice a month. We try to find people in the industry that we look up to that are leading their way in different areas outside of what we're already talking about in the community. And what we'd like to do is, one, I know you guys a lot of you here are new to Salesforce in general. So it gives you a great opportunity to get to know somebody else outside of myself, which I think is super beneficial as far as networking goes, getting a different perspective on things, having different questions answered that I might not know. So there's one aspect of it. The second aspect is this is really a cool place. I think, you have LinkedIn, you have social media and stuff like that. But there's never really truly a great place to connect with somebody and just ask them one-on-one questions like this. So obviously Kyle's in a whole different ballgame than what I'm in as far as his career goes. So he'll have a great perspective on why he chose the route he did. He's going to have different experiences than obviously I did. So we're going to kind of go down that here tonight with Kyle. So I always highly encourage you guys jumping in here into the chat. We'll keep it active, trying to comment on things that Kyle's saying, links to things that Kyle might mention. So if you have a question, feel free to post it in the chat. You can do that if you'd like. Otherwise, there should be a little hand raise thing that you can do here. I'll see it pop up on my side, and we can take you off mute and you can ask Kyle your question yourself. So with all that being said, since we're about 1 minute over here, I want to turn the time over to our guest tonight. We got Kyle Battle with us, and I want to not take anything away from him. So we'll let him do his introduction, tell us who he is and how he fits into the Salesforce industry. So Kyle, go ahead when you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it. I'm super happy to be here, share a little bit about my Salesforce journey. It's been very unconventional. So hopefully you guys can take something away from that. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of how I've gotten to where I am now in a few minutes. And then, we've got a couple more questions. You guys can fire questions at me from there. So I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem now for 12 years, since 2011, right? I started off so I played college sports. I played college football, had all intentions of doing stuff in sports. My degree's in creative writing. So I was planning to be a sports writer. Never in a million years would have guessed that I ended up where I am today, honestly. But that was kind of where things were going for me. The year that I got out of school, there was the year of the lockout in the NFL. And so I had opportunities to work with different NFL teams and go in the offices, and I got to go to the NFL headquarters and see like the office. Like, it was really cool, but they weren't hiring anybody because it was a lockout. They were like, we don't even know if there's going to be a season this year. So I had a friend whose father ran a sales performance firm, which was based in Orlando, Florida. And what they did was they pretty much helped people close sales deals. So they would help people do like training, and they also did Salesforce. So my first introduction to Salesforce was as an end user trainer. So let's say a company just acquired or just got Salesforce licenses, just finished an implementation. They could then set up time with me after that to say like, oh, well, I remember this from training, but how do I actually enter these business cards I just got this weekend? Or like, I got a new deal that just came to me. How do I actually? So I would walk them through, this is how you create a new opportunity, and this is how you add products, whatever that might be. So that was kind of how it started. From there, I had a coworker who was on, and this was well before Trailhead, right? There's no way to learn, right? But I had a coworker who was willing to let me look over his shoulder and listen in on phone calls. And so I would listen to him take calls, and he was doing much more Salesforce stuff. I wasn't doing as much Salesforce at the time, but I was just kind of listening to how he thought through problems. And eventually the light went off, and I was like, oh, okay, well, if I'm teaching them how to do this on the front end, and I'm seeing what you're doing and to build it in the back end, like, I think I could do that, right? So ended up getting certified, failed the test the first 2 times. So don't beat yourself up if you fail the exam. It happens all the time. I recommend taking it just to learn how they ask questions, because it's not traditional. So if you can afford it, right? I recommend doing that. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. I failed the first 2. I failed lots of exams, trust me. I did that. I ended up getting certified in Sales Cloud and as an admin. And then I decided to move out to Los Angeles and work with a part-time consulting firm. And so we'll get into some specifics there. How did I get that particular job? Because I think there are some lessons there. But I did that for about 2 years, 2.5 years, until very serendipitously, kind of some of my passions from my past kind of circled back up at the right time. So my family, we have a Special Olympics family. My brother is a Special Olympics athlete. My mom's a coach. I've been a coach. I've been an athlete when I was younger. So like we're just always done Special Olympics. And the World Games were coming to Los Angeles in 2015. This was in 2013, and they used Salesforce. So I ended up applying for that job. Ended up being 2 blocks away from my house. I could walk there. Like everything just aligned. Like it was really, really nice. And so I was able to build out that system. So I worked there. I was the only person on the Salesforce team. This was before a lot of the possibilities of Salesforce were really realized. And so as we built things out, I had done consulting already for a couple of years. So I knew like a couple different areas of how Salesforce could be used. So when problems came up with the World Games, I would say, oh, like, what if we just did it in Salesforce? Like that's just like 6 more fields. And like we can just, you guys can manage it. You got your own profile already. I can just make sure you guys handle that and it's fine. We did that for like 2 years, ended up being this huge monster. So after that, I started doing freelance consulting with nonprofits that were using Salesforce. So like I was the only admin. I was a team of 1 and we had to manage this. This was a international event. We had 30,000 volunteer applications that we had to process, for 7,000 family members and 200 miles of venues we had to cover. Like this was huge, but it was just me. And so I was able to go to other nonprofits and say, I know it feels overwhelming. It's possible. Trust me, I've done it. It wasn't more overwhelming than what I had to deal with, I promise. And so I used that and just started consulting other nonprofits on like, these are the things you can do to get better leverage your Salesforce org. Did that for a couple of years, all the while trying to do more creative writing stuff, right? So I'm at my heart, I'm a creative writer. During part of that time, I wrote for Bleacher Report for a couple of years. I used to have a blog on Huffington Post that I wrote for a little bit. Published a book with my brother at one point. So always just like some creative things. But in 2017, that all kind of came to a head when this story that came to me. I didn't believe it was real and it ended up being real. And so I was asked to go like investigate the story and ended up making a documentary out of it. So kind of like stopped my whole Salesforce career for like 6 months, man, more like, about 9 months, to try and chase this creative endeavor. Didn't work out. I recommend chasing your dreams. I don't regret it at all. But there's a reason why you get money for movies before you make them. They're very expensive. And those expenses creep up. So I basically went broke. Trying to make this movie. Ended up in my grandparents' basement trying to recover. During that time, I was writing a book for someone else that ended up kind of keeping me afloat, and started trying to find some more Salesforce clients. So I was like, I got to figure this out. I can't abandon Salesforce. Like I wanted to try and say like, okay, I've done this, and now I want to go try and do this creative writing thing. And then ultimately was like, I need to do this. I got to juggle these 2 things better. So I found that match. Was able to come back out to California, met my wife while I was back at home too. So I definitely can't regret that step back. So we met up there and are now married. But pretty much ever since then, I've been doing consulting. So I more for profit, but freelance consulting for about the next 3 or 4 years. In that time, especially because I work freelance, had to wear all hats. So I've done everything from, like I said, started as end user trainer, business analyst, solution architect, end user training, executive coach sometimes, just like strategist, like everything except for putting code together from scratch. I'm not a developer, it's not my skill set, but even like reviewing code if I have to, like pretty much worn every single hat. Got a little bit burnt out doing that, wearing all of the hats on projects a lot. It's one thing to be able to do it, but it does get very taxing. So about 2 years ago, I joined Slalom, where I'm now a senior consultant and now have kind of more of just a team where I'm able to like take my skills and really focus in on one part of a project and do it well, as opposed to kind of half-assing, right, all of these different parts of the project. And so, yeah, that's where I am now. So I've been there for 2 years. About 8 months ago now, spoke at the first Dreaming in Color conference. So that was the Salesforce's first regional conference geared towards professionals of color. And so I went there, I spoke about developer orgs and how I've used those throughout my career to kind of showcase skills that my resume doesn't have. Um, that over the next 6 months really turned into me starting a company called the Salesforce Anchor, where we basically create educational supplements to Trailhead, where you look at uh, everyday common scenarios as a way to learn what Salesforce does, right? So we use things like buying furniture, or even if it's like a popular TV show. So we did like Schitt's Creek. We imagined that we were one of the characters in Schitt's Creek. What if they were to use Salesforce? This is what it would look like. Or if you're the producer of a show, Love It or List It on HGTV, what would you need to track in order to make sure that you keep track of the listings and the agents and the all of that stuff, right? So we use common scenarios where it's easier to root an anchor in something that you already know, so that you can actually learn what's new, as opposed to also having to learn like the business use case. So I've been doing that for like I guess officially for about 6 months now. Super excited to see where that goes in 2023. But yeah, I'll stop there. That's kind of the like abbreviated resume version. Let me pause and see if there's any questions.
That was a great introduction. Definitely a lot to unpack there that I'm sure people are going to be interested in. I know you and I kind of talked about like some stuff going into like the consulting route. But honestly, like you had an awesome transition from where you were at. I think that's awesome. Like growing up, being heavily involved with sports, like your family and everything like that, yourself included. And then also having like this creative writing background, and then like transitioning that. And I'm sure we have some people here as well that I would equate something kind of similar, where it's maybe a little daunting to like do something like that, right? Because it's like almost like this 180 of like, whoa, like I've never really done something like that, right? I've never really done any of this technical building something out on the back end of something. And now that's like where I'm trying to head. So I think that's awesome. Obviously your consulting route. And then I was going to say too, like speaking, I think a lot of people have brought that up. So I think that's going to be a cool one to unpack during the time here. And then obviously your business as well. I want to give some time to talk about that. I think that's awesome way that you have it set up right now, how you just described, where you're picking something that's relevant to help people understand a better way to learn Salesforce, a better way to kind of relate to it. I think that's a genius way to kind of approach that. Let's see here. I know Eric, during the concept of making me. Okay, cool. I didn't know if you're asking a question. Awesome. Okay, well, to get started then on some of those items, I guess where I wanted to start, where we're waiting for some questions here, is, you kind of shared your journey a little bit about going into possibly like this documentary. And by the way, did you end up making the documentary as well, or how did that end up turning out?
There is a rough cut that's ready. I got about 3 hours of it that's ready, but I didn't have a budget for reenactments, which is really what adds up. You'll learn, like if you ever watch a documentary and try to imagine it without reenactments, it's just not very fun. So the story is great, but I'm trying to figure out how to do that, or to get like a cartoon artist to do some cool reenactments that way, or something like that. So there's a story there if you really wanted to see it, but it's not the best viewing experience. I'll admit that too.
Got it. So when you were kind of making that transition is where I wanted to pick up. I think that's going to be a relatable note for a lot of people here, is like you're in this profession, you've been making it work, you want to kind of go that route. It's where your mind's been the whole time. Tell us again how you, I guess, like picked up Salesforce. And then obviously there was that time where you're wanting to make money. So I know there's like a motivation there where it's like, okay, this isn't really going the way I want. This is going to provide me some money. Was there anything outside of the money though, where you were like really feeling this calling to kind of start going back to Salesforce?
I guess it's kind of tangentially related to Salesforce, but just like security, right? Like being in freelance, you're always kind of like, one of my old mentors used to use this, like a zoo animal versus a wild animal analogy. Like some people are just cool, being in the zoo, and that's kind of more of a like salary. You're gonna have somebody that brings you food 3 times a day or however much. Like you don't have to worry about stuff, and that's fine for some. That's fine for people, and just even one person throughout their life can kind of switch. And then you've got the wild animal who's like, nope, I'm gonna go out there and catch me an elephant. And like, sure, it might take me a year to go catch an elephant, but that's what I want, right? And that's what. So I thought I was more of a wild animal and realized I was cool with the zoo, right? So yeah, it was a feast or famine type scenario. That's kind of how it is out there for freelance. The famine really hit, and I just kind of felt like, honestly, this might sound bad, but like I felt like I was beyond the starving artist part of my life, right?
Yeah.
Like I was like 30 at this point, right? So I'm like, this is cool. And like, yes, I've done this before where like I've, put this time in and I get it. I know you have to put in your 10,000 hours of your sweat equity or whatever. But I'm like, I also know Salesforce. Like there's no need for me to be starving right now with this kind of market, where it was what at that time, this was 5 years ago. And just the different price point, honestly, like you can just it was just clear. It's like even if I do want to do the creative stuff, I still need to do enough Salesforce to keep my lights on so that I can write on nights and weekends, right? So it was just kind of more of a balancing act, but also just realizing like Salesforce isn't going anywhere. The skill set there's still demand for it. I mean, at the time, it's kind of balanced out a little bit more here lately, just
Yeah.
in the tech space in general. But even then, like people are still using and buying Salesforce. Like the need for Salesforce is not going anywhere. Even further, I think my skill set is more in like the business analyst space of being able to translate a technology and acknowledge or identify where a business can implement it. And that's a skill set that will never go away, I don't think. I think just like being able, new technology is going to always come up. If you can be one that can see that technology and then say, oh, this is where someone can plug it in, you'll always have a job in the world that we live in. Until babies are born, no one at all. Right? Like until it's just so common that just everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. So I just looked at that and I'm looking at the writing, and it's really hard to get an agent, and it's really hard to get, representation. It's really hard to get funding. Like all those things are just difficult to the point where I was like, all right, I gotta figure out this balance better. And it did take a while, but I think I got it now.
I like that you said that you appreciated the security and demand of it. Another note I wanted to highlight too, what you said is just like seeing that aspect that obviously you went through too, being a freelancer, you're playing that hat of like a project manager as well. And a lot of, I think what you do in the freelancing, being there myself, it's like that skill alone, right? Like makes you feel super confident because it's like, hey, like if I ever didn't want to do Salesforce, I know how to like manage relationships between people and be
Exactly.
that liaison. So if I moved into something else that maybe I didn't know the back end, like I could at least do this job right here, which is like take requirements. What do we got to get done? How do I manage this? Let's keep it on track, right? Until something else happens.
Right.
So I think that's an awesome one to call out too. We've had some interest from people I know of like DM'd me specifically about consulting and again, like wanting to maybe do that sooner. I feel like most people, I don't know if this was your path too, because you kind of did it this way too. But I feel like most people I talk to, it's kind of the reverse. They'll end up doing, some admin jobs and then they get into something like freelancing or consulting. So for you going kind of more into the freelancing right off the bat, what would you say the pros and cons were of making that choice?
Ooh. I think it's great to do consulting earlier in a career. And the reason is, and this is assuming it's just like, hey, I'm going to do consulting and you get the job, right? Obviously, there's a lot of more factors, but like, in my first 3 years, I think I did like 11 or 12 projects. So that's like 11 or 12 different uses of Salesforce, right? So I'm already like, as I'm learning the system, I'm seeing it done in so many different ways. And so I just think that helped me learn because I didn't learn what the Cloud Kicks version or the Trailhead version of like opportunity record type. I don't even know I don't even know what that is, right? Like how they set that up because it wasn't around when I learned, right? Um, yeah. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. What was the question?
No, you're all good. I was just saying, what did you feel like for you personally were the pros and cons of like getting into
The
freelancing
pros and cons
first?
of doing that. That's right.
Yeah.
I think exposure to multiple projects is definitely the biggest thing. Because you just get to see a lot more. Like, and I guess the other thing you kind of have to decide is like, along with that, I guess it's kind of still like there's the freelance, the wild animal and zoo animal analogy that's kind of still similar. But also, do you want to be a consultant or do you want to be an in-house admin? Like that's the first decision you got to make. Do you want to be the type that's like, okay, I'm in consulting. At this point, I've been doing this for 12 years. I think I've worked with I think I'm at 79 or 80 clients. So like I've seen a shit ton of versions. Like this is the way Salesforce can go. Some people get overwhelmed by that. That's a lot. Like I've had to do, upwards of 8 or 9 projects that are active at a given time, right? And like that personally, at that time, I should say, I've changed, but I would get bored. And I was always thinking of new ideas, and I just needed to bounce back and forth between different projects. I would get stale on this one, I'd switch over, try and build out this flow, and I'd learn something from this flow that helped me, and that just worked for me. There's also times where I'm like, honestly, I just want to stick with one org and see it through for a year, right? I want to see that life cycle of, okay, we rolled it out in 6 weeks, and now people know like, oh, what an activity is and how to log a task. But like, okay, wait till I show them Outlook connector in a month, and then wait till I show them opportunities and we update those Outlook layouts so they can now see and then you kind of think through like, I want to see that too. There's a benefit to that. As a storyteller, I appreciate that you're building that storyline, right? So that's the first thing you got to decide. And then if you decide to go into consulting, freelance, or working with a firm, and there's benefits to both. I guess I can go into those a little bit now, but like freelance, you can pick your own projects. Like I said, no to, in which honestly early on, I don't think you should take on all projects and just learn. Make sure you have parameters and that you protect yourself. Don't say, yes, I'll do everything that you want, but just in order to see how people use Salesforce, how to deal with people, how to explain Salesforce to people who don't know anything about what it is, like that's an important skill. With a company, also as a freelancer, you're in charge of all your sales. So I didn't even mention the role, like of the roles involved there. There's also sales. You have to be a salesperson. You're always looking for your next project. You're a new lead. You kind of have to have that sales mentality to be good at it. Not everybody has it. If you don't, you might struggle a little bit unless you just have good connections there. But yeah, that's a big thing. And then if you go with the firm, you don't have to deal with sales. Like someone's going to hand you a project and say, hey, you're on this now, go work on this. And you usually have a little bit of a say to say, I'm looking to do more Sales Cloud or more Service Cloud, or I don't know CPQ. But it depends on the size of the firm, right? A smaller firm, you're gonna have to figure it out. That's the benefit. That's the joy of it, though, right? You're gonna get thrown on projects. You're gonna have to wear a bunch of hats. You're gonna build. You're gonna be thrown in the fire, and it's a great way to learn. I know it's kind of scary. Hopefully, you're not alone in the fire. If you're alone, you might have a problem. But like, you want to like, it's not bad to just kind of be thrown in there and kind of figure out how things work. The other part about working with a consulting firm is you get a paycheck every 2 weeks. You won't get paid every 2 weeks as a freelancer. You just won't. I don't care how you set it up. Typically, you'll set up a net 30, which means you send the invoice and they'll pay you 30 days later. A lot of times you have to chase that down. It doesn't happen. Planning your personal finances when you don't get paid every 2 weeks is very different if you're not used to it. Like all of those things you kind of have to weigh in to whether or not you want to work freelance or with a consultant. So I know I kind of like spun off that question and just took over somewhere else. But I think those are useful because those are the questions you got to ask early on is like, where do I want to go? You don't want to get stuck in a consulting job and you realize like you just want to do one project at a time and they're giving you 5 projects. That's just, you're going to hate Salesforce in like a year. We don't want that.
And well, what I was going to say too is adding on to your comment there is people kind of see this North Star of like consulting, right? Which is true. You have this uncapped of what you can make, what you can do, what you choose to work on, and setting your own hours and that kind of stuff. And that's awesome. That's part of the benefit. But like you said, the other side that they don't usually pick up on is what you also said. It's like getting into that grind of you're always hunting down that next lead. You're always working with somebody like hopefully in your pipeline to like take calls and meetings, and you're doing free work to be like, hey, like this is why I'm going to be a good consultant. You got to stay on track of all of that. Like, who are my leads? What do I got going? You got to be
an accountant.
Yeah, too. You do. Yeah,
you got to do invoices every month.
Yeah, right. And like,
it sucks. I hated them.
I'm fairly new to it still. Like, I really haven't been doing it too long, like 5 or 6 months now. And obviously it overlapped with the new year. So yeah, getting ready to do like my taxes, and that's its own thing, and like setting up my LLC. So there's all this stuff where it's like, yeah, okay, like that part that you mentioned where it's like, that is nice that I get to pick what I want to do for the most part. Like sometimes I don't because I just need to get a job in, right? But it's like, I get to pick it. you have this uncapped thing, but at the same time, like I'm also doing all these other things that you don't have to worry about ever at a full-time role.
Right.
So I like the analogy you used once again, where it's just like, you got to kind of figure out your own personality first to see if that is something that you can stick with or not, because it is a lot of like on the hunt, I would say, of, okay, like I got to be a little more aggressive versus, my wife, she works just like a W-2 job. I obviously did that for 5 years. So now that like we're in split roles, I always get like jealous, and I'm sure she does, of like what I'm doing. Cause I'm like, like you're just over here like chilling, waiting to get this answer back from your boss, or whatever. And I'm over here like taking all these calls, trying to figure out what I'm doing next. So yeah, anyways, I think that was a great call out on all that. I really appreciate that. One last thing before we move on to the next topic on that same note is, how did you balance that for yourself? I know firsthand where it's like trying to figure out how to get paid and start trying to set stuff up like that. For somebody that maybe does have that interest in personality, what are some tips you could give them of like, okay, if I were to restart, like this is the tech stack I would have, or like these are the tools I would get into to make sure I could balance that?
That's a great question. If you know anything about the work that I do, this will make sense to you. I created a dev org that does all of this. Once I got to a point where I realized that I needed to keep track of it. So I know that not everyone can do that, but there's a lot of essentially like invoicing or like project management tools that you can get off of the App Exchange that are free, that will let you just keep track of. You just need a line item list, honestly, that you can roll up to an invoice, and then that invoice, you can either export it to some template or you can build a template. It's not that complicated of a config, to be honest. That was what I did, but I'm sure there's other there's better technologies out there. The other problem that I ran into with DevOrgs is you get limits on your data. And when you're logging hours, like I had upwards of, like I said, 8 to 10 clients at a time. I was logging 20 different time entries a day, right? I do half an hour here and an hour out, like all of those are different time entries. And that's just data storage. And then in DevOrg, you're going to run out of storage at some point. So I've had to delete those every year and store them somewhere. Like, so there is technical debt there that just like is annoying. I don't think it's so bad that it's not worth trying out if you know how. But I would say that. I would also say, like, honestly, after you get the admin cert, I would go like everything business analyst driven, right? If you can have those skills and you can bring that quality to any project, you'll always have a value. Because pretty much what you're doing is figuring out how to document the individual needs of the system and how to move them through to completion. So even if you don't know, this is kind of what Jordan was saying before about that project management skill. Like, even if you don't know how to fix something, if you know how to point out that it's broken, there's still a value. Like, someone needs to know that, right? Like, you might not be a technical architect, but you could be a solution architect. I'm on a project right now with a guy, a solution architect, who doesn't know anything technical. He knows Salesforce capabilities and he knows what it can do. And he knows kind of how technology works. Like, he knows enough. But if you were to just, hey, go create a new object with these 5 fields, no chance he could do that, right? But there's still a role, right? So yeah, just knowing, like, that's the other hard part, is there are a lot of different tracks, especially when you get on more diverse projects, bigger projects. There's like, I'm on a project now where just 20 different people on a project. Like, what you would ask, what do they even do? Like, I actually don't know what they all do quite yet, but there's a lot of little nuances like that, right? And like I said, being able to point out problems, the project manager side, being able to just understand the value of writing good user stories and how that ensures that a project is profitable, which isn't a direct line, but like, if your user stories are bad, then that means your UAT goes longer than you expect, which means that the client is now a little bit shaky on if you're the right person they should have worked with, but you're so far down the line that they can't get out of it. So now you just got that tension that you have to deal with every time you talk to them. And then you got to go back and fix it and try and get them to do the test. Just write good test scripts. If you know how to do that from the beginning, you can save all of that hassle down the line. So I would say go for the BA skill set next. I think that's probably one of the more universal ones. And that's honestly kept me afloat, because then you tie that in with the storytelling, is kind of where I've carved out my niche, is that every presentation is a story. right? Like everyone has their preconceived notions of what's happening, and your job as the storyteller is to, in the first couple slides, is to get everybody to understand, like, this is what we're talking about, this is the scenario, this is what we're trying to solve for, like that's what this is. And then as you go through, you're telling them this is how we're going to do it. And then at the end, you might have a screenshot of this is what it will look like, right? And that's just a story of just kind of slowly walking someone along this like storyline. Being able to do that and also work it into the framework of the like user stories and test scripts and all that is a very valuable skill set I'm learning. So I will throw that out there too. There's a place in the ecosystem for that. You may have to learn how to speak to it, which will be different, right? You're not doing admin stuff as much, but there's still a value in that.
I appreciate you going into that. And I think that actually answered one of the questions in the chat, because you slightly touched on it. It was, have you ever like been in a situation where somebody kind of has that tension? You've like implemented a solution, they got disappointed with it. How did you handle it? You slightly touched on it. Maybe you want to go into it a little deeper. I heard you say there's that awkward tension that comes up, and it's like, how do I now manage my relationship with them? And
right.
How do I stay on the same page so that it doesn't get worse? Or how do we obviously try to make it better? I don't know if you want to dive into that a little more, and then we'll go to the next one that they have here.
Yeah. I would summarize that as the biggest role in consulting is expectations management. If you can make sure that the people on the client side know what to expect and you deliver it, then you're straight. If you know that you can build an object in 4 hours, tell the client you'll do it in 8. I'll get it back to you tomorrow. Yep, by tomorrow morning we can talk about it, right? Like if they expect it tomorrow, and then you send them an email at the end of the day, like, oh, I got it done. Like if you want to log in and check it out, you can, but we'll still talk tomorrow. You look like a rock star. Because I'm like, oh, they said they would get it done tomorrow, but all you did was expectations. I just told them to expect it later. And then and it's not, I know that sounds kind of manipulative. That's a very like a more of extreme version of it, but that's essentially what the game is. It's like, I'm going to pay you millions of dollars, hundreds of dollars an hour to build something out that's going to eventually turn into increased revenue for my company. I want that tomorrow. Every company wants that tomorrow. Your job is to say, no, it's going to take 6 months. It's going to take, and then to show them along the way what to expect. But then also when you do it, showing them, hey, I did this now, right? You now have this new field. You now have this new profile. You can now invite these people in like along the way. And then they understand over time, like, okay, these are not small changes. These take a lot of time. They take a lot of discussion. Sometimes the client says, well, shit, well, we got to meet about this before we even pay them to come and help us figure out. We got to figure our stuff out first, right? It's tougher because it does mean you have to push back on clients sometimes, and that is something you learn. It's a delicate balance, but that's what they pay. That's what they pay you if you're the expert. And if you're the expert and you can show, like, no, this has to be done this way, and this is why, and this is how, that's ultimately what they want. And so, yeah, you'll get pushback sometimes, but I think setting that expectation from the very, very first like the kickoff call, literally, should be a slide in the kickoff call that sets some of these things up. Like, even if it's like, when can you contact me? I'm personally big on respecting people's calendars, right? Like whatever time zone you're in, we can get work done and everyone can work in their time zone, and we should be able to be like comfortable, right? Like, yeah, that's it on that.
That was excellent. Yeah. And I think, again, I wanted to double down on what you said, because it could come off that way, like you were pointing out, like, especially for somebody new, like trying to figure out the hour thing that you're mentioning, where it's like, hey, if this is going to take, 4 hours, tell them 8, give you some leeway. I would also say, like, something I've tried to relate to that same idea is, if you look into other industries that quote you on time for labor, they also do it too. I think it's just something that we don't know about until it happens to be your job. So like a mechanic, it does something similar, right? It's like when you go into a mechanic, that guy might have 20 years of experience and he could change something in 20 minutes, but the book is telling him it's 2 hours, because we don't know if that means he's got to train somebody else up on it. That might mean he's delegating time for where he's going to be or what else he's managing at the shop, right? So the book tells him this is a 2-hour job, and that's what he's going to quote you for. That's what you're going to pay him, is a 2-hour job. And what that also helps, like Kyle's pointing out, is on the consulting side, if you think it through, you would be punishing yourself the better you get at your job. So you're saying,
Exactly.
hey, right now I can do this in 4 hours and you're going to pay me for 4 hours, but 2 years from now, maybe I could do this in an hour. Well, why would you want to get paid less now that you're better at it and more efficient, right?
Exactly.
Like you don't. So you want to try to keep that leeway like Kyle's talking about. And it's always something very, very acceptable in like the developer world as well. They do something similar.
And let me also, like, this is not like, you're not lying, right? I don't want to make it seem like you're saying like, oh, this is so much harder than it is. Like, you're not lying. You're just simply saying like, I'll get it to you on Monday, even though you know you can get it to them tomorrow, right? The other thing is when you get into certain parts of project where, and because I agree, to me, that's like, as a freelancer especially, that's where you make your money. Because when you set up a project, let's say you got a project and it's scoped out for 100 hours. And those 100 hours involves a custom object, 20 custom fields, 10 reports, right? And you figure out, okay, each report's going to take about an hour, and each object will give them 2 hours. And each field, we'll say it takes 10 fields. Let's do 5 fields in an hour, right? So then you figure out, you calculate like, okay, this is a 100-hour project. You could go do that in a night if you're good at your job, though. So you do it in a night, but you still get paid for 100 hours because you agreed that this work is 100 hours of labor. When I hand this off to you, you're going to pay me for 100 hours of work. Sorry, I'm good enough to do it in 50 or 25 or 10, but that's how you make money as a Salesforce consultant, is you figure out how to cut down your own margin. It also comes back into scoping. When you're setting up like, hey, how long do you think this will take? I used to always say 10 an hour, 0.1 hours per field. Like, you got to give it some value. You can't, because you can do fields very, very easily, but you kind of got to give some number there. You don't want to say an hour for a field. Your clients are going to find out that you're hosting them. It doesn't take that long. But you say, okay, I could do 10 fields in an hour. That would be 6 minutes per field. That's creating it, throwing on a layout, maybe adding the validation rule if necessary, but like very basic stuff. But then, like, if you read like any of my courses, you'll see you jump in the schema builder and create 100 fields in 100 seconds down there, right? Like, you can do it very, very quickly. And that's when you can now go out and find another project. And now you can have 5 projects at a time, and you're getting paid, I won't say 5 full-time wages, but you're getting 5 part-time wages for, right? And that's really how, as a freelancer, you make your schedule, and you can kind of live a really cool lifestyle if you find that balance. But if you don't scope well, your clients are going to always want more. They're going to always want more. And if they don't understand how much it takes, that's when you get into that kind of that tension where it's like, well, why not? Or why can't we have it right now? So you want to basically set those expectations from the very beginning. And then every once in a while, when you can, like we call it, put some money in the goodwill bank, right? Go above and beyond, right? And sometimes that doesn't mean you're actually going above and beyond. Sometimes that just means, I told you I'd get this tomorrow morning. It's today afternoon. I'm going to send it to you now. I'm like, oh man, you always need a little bit extra. I can count on that person, then. Or maybe you add an extra formula field to the layout that displays a green, yellow, or red light based on a status field or something else, right? Just little things. Throw some money in the goodwill bank. Because when it comes time to push back and say, hey, this is a bad idea, this process needs more work, this data model is gonna, it's not scalable or whatever. If you've got that in the bank, then they'll listen to you more, right? You've already shown, like, I'm not here to steal a bunch of hours or find a bunch of work. Like, I've shown you, I'll do extra. Now is when you need, like, this is when you pay me to be the expert. Now is when I'm telling you, you got to do it this way. And if you've got that bank, amount, it's not empty, then it's a lot easier to have that conversation.
I like that a lot. Those were all really solid tips of like what you could do to kind of show your cards that way. I've found with like myself too, it's, setting those things early on, like you said, has always been key where, for example, I just took on a new client. And so I'm playing that game where, I got to get to know his personality. He's got to get to know mine. I got to see what he does and doesn't do. And so one of them, small tweak, is just, I'm usually pretty willing to like play around with my schedule and make things work. But early on, I usually try to set that tone fast where it's
Yep.
like,
Yep.
I've already had a couple meetings where he's trying to swap it out for something else, or, hey, can you meet a little earlier? And my answer, even though maybe on some of them I could finagle it a little bit, it's like, no, because the expectation here is you and I set a meeting and I made time for you at that time. And that's when I'm going to be available. Now, going forward in the future, like you said, with the Goodwill Bank, it's like, okay, if that tone is set and he's understanding that, maybe on the next one down the line, like you said, I love that, where it's like, okay, maybe this one I could, maybe this one I could move it 30 minutes
Every
ahead.
once in a while. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure, sure.
exactly. And that
But
kind of
I
puts
agree.
that
I
in
did the
there.
same thing. Yeah, the first week of any new project, I don't respond to emails after hours. You can email me at 6, cool, I'll respond first thing in the morning. I'll
Yeah.
even have the email written, the response written sometimes. And it's like not a huge deal, but like like I said, I'm big on calendar, like respecting calendars in that way. And yeah, I always set that tone with this, especially when I was freelance, was like, these are the hours. During these hours, you have 100% of me. I'm here for you. Do whatever you need me to do. But I check out at 5. I also have
Yeah.
a family and I have other things I like to do as well. So like, and just set that up. And they, they don't, if there's a problem with that, then you may have other issues you want to deal through culturally, working with that client, right? That's just something else. But typically they'll respect that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I don't want to beat that horse any longer. I know that we've kind of been going over that, but also like what you said, it's just like having that tone early on, I think really helps that. And that bleeds into what I want to say here, in case people are listening that are going to go the full-time route. That bleeds into that as well, because it's your work-life balance. I think I saw a quote recently that kind of talked about this, but it was basically summing it up to say that like your work-life balance is dependent on you, right? Like nobody's going to do that for you. So it's setting boundaries like this. If you want to overwork, then by all means, they're going to overwork you, right? Because they want things now, like Kyle has said. Every business does. Every business wants to make money now. So if you're willing to work till 8 every night, then they're going to catch on to that early and they're going to work you at 8, like that's what they're going to do. Versus Kyle's approach, like what he's saying is, no, I'm done at 5 because I got a life and I got other things to take care of. It's also understandable. It doesn't hurt you in any way. I think it just ends up being what I've learned from experience is you set those boundaries, right? Like people allow it to go that way. I know we had one other question in here from Max.
I would also say there, if I can add on to that,
Yeah.
though, it's one of those, it's kind of like when you were in school and you had that teacher that was super duper nice and super cool. And then they realized like, oh crap, I got to get control of this class. And they tried to be strict all of a sudden, but you already know you can get away with everything. So it just doesn't work. It's the exact same here, right? It's like, if you start off it's easy to start off strict and become more lenient. It's not easy to be lenient and then become more strict. So just start off and just set that boundary over time as you're comfortable, slowly back it away. But you definitely don't want to be that teacher who realizes like, oh crap, I lost control of this. And now, like, of course, they're going to send you meeting requests whenever they want and expect you to accept them and be there, like, and you'll get into that. So save yourself on that one.
Yeah. And it's ironic, but it ends up actually pushing more respect towards you. People respect you as you set those deadlines. So that also plays into it. I know Max had another one that I wanted to ask real quick. I think it's about more how you ended up finding some of those opportunities. So he asked, how exactly or where do you find these freelance Salesforce project opportunities?
Great question. A lot on LinkedIn, just being present and people knowing that you're a freelancer for me. There's also other networks. I can't think of the one. I haven't used it, but it's got the word 10 in it, like the number 10, like Work 10 or 10 Work or something like that. That's apparently a really good network. Fiverr and Upwork are also really good. I got a lot of projects from past projects though, right? So you work on a project with someone and then that company, like in the startup space, right? Those companies dissolve all the time and those people go elsewhere and they're on different, and that happened 5 or 6 different times where I had a client who just went to another company that also had Salesforce. They knew what Salesforce was capable of and they saw that that's not how they were using it. And then they bring you in. That worked for me a lot that way. Then there was this other thing I'm not the proudest of this technique, but it works. I would watch job boards And so I would watch job boards and see who's hiring Salesforce positions. So I know like, okay, these companies are trying to hire these positions. Then I would watch and just see which ones weren't getting filled. And I would actually apply to those jobs after like 90 days or something. We would talk, and twice I convinced the person that was hiring that they didn't even need a full-time position because they weren't ready for it. Instead, they needed a consultant to come in and help them get their processes straight. And then when it was time to bring in a consultant, they brought me in. So like that has worked, where you see a stale job listing where it's like they're clearly trying to fill this position. But like as a business person, I'm like, okay, that means they need this position. And so someone there's overworked. Someone's filling this gap right now. Like because they're, you know what I mean? Like it's got to be happening. And so the argument was, okay, you could go out and hire someone for 75K to come in and do this work when you can't even tell me what they're going to be doing yet. Right? You just know you need someone. It's like, what are 35 of their hours going to look like in a week? If you can't tell me that, you probably don't need to hire someone yet, right? You might full time at least. And so I would walk them through that. And I would say, well, if all you need them to do is this, this, and this, like I can do that once a week for you for $100 an hour, right? And we would just negotiate it, and that worked as well. If you can just talk to these business owners, especially smaller companies, because they're all trying to save money. And a lot of times they don't know what they're doing in the Salesforce space. Like you just need to tell them like, hey, you don't need a full timer right now. You could go find someone out of college to do what you want. Like lower your job description. Like, you know, like just things like that. And then you gain trust. As a consultant, all you ever want to do is get trust. If you want your people, your clients to trust you. That's the key. If you have trustful clients, you'll never be an empty consultant. Like they'll always bring you back for forever. Like that's really how you stay a good consultant. So yeah, gain trust.
Love that. Thanks for the question on that, Max. I think that I want to go with the time we have left. We talked a lot about like your freelance journey. And then you had mentioned this in your introduction, but you said at one point in your life for what you wanted as far as lifestyle and stuff, I'm sure you decided to go back into more of a full-time role, obviously still the consultant with a huge company, Slalom. What made you want to do that piece of it? Was it just kind of like wearing all the hats you were kind of tired of doing? You just want to focus on one specific thing, or was it a different motivator?
Yeah, definitely wearing all the hats got exhausting. I also wanted to work on bigger projects. It's like as I was doing stuff, I'm like, I can do bigger stuff. And just as a freelancer, there is a ceiling on the projects you can get. You know, you're at a certain level, you're competing against Deloitte and like Slalom and like, you know, I would never try to get a project that Slalom was even bidding for, right? Just because it's just a different scale. Yeah, sorry, what was the original question?
So I
I
guess
have
I
so
just
many things
wanted
I
to
want to
kind
say right
of,
now.
no, yeah, you're good. I wanted to shed the light for people of, you know, you've talked a lot about the freelance and how you liked that and what worked well, but obviously you're not doing freelance anymore. You work for a consulting company. So my question is more about trying to let people know like why you made that decision. Why did you move from a freelancer to full-time? Like, was there, you
So
know,
yeah, got you. For honestly, it was security. Um, at that particular time, I was at a way like kind of goes in waves where you find a new client. Like you have maybe one client that you got like for a year or so, and then you might have two or three other clients that just kind of rotate. It was at a point where they were all kind of coming to an end. I also had just recently gotten married, so I just had to think about my future and finances differently. And so it was really important to just know where my paychecks were going to come, and every 2 weeks would have been nice as well. Um, and then, like I said, like I got better, right? As I was working freelance, I got better at doing Salesforce stuff, but I was always doing so much that I could never really hone in. And so I'm able to be just the BA on a project, right? And I knew that, or I was able to be a solution architect on just one project, or um, yeah. And honestly, I was at a point too where I wanted to be on just one project at a time, and that was one thing that Slalom pretty much promises is that you will only be on one project at a time on delivery. You may be on several projects throughout a year, but you'll only be on one at a time, which I just gotten tired of it, honestly. But yeah, I would say the security, um, the team, that was big. So like working freelance, you're at the disposal of the client's team, right? So if they don't have the skills or the people, like now part of your job is teaching them what a record type is. And then teaching them how to think through the strategy of record. Like that's a completely different job than just configuring record types, right? And honestly, and in that small business space, a lot of those people just don't have that skill set. So you just become more. It was just I didn't want to do that anymore, and I wanted to know that I had a team that I could count on. And the other part was I was like the senior most Salesforce technical resource with a couple of these teams, and I was a couple of the smaller firms that I had worked with. And I know that I'm not the best at Salesforce. Like I'm a creative writer. I've figured some of these things out and I can deliver whatever you need to deliver. Don't get me wrong. But in terms of having high level strategic conversations about how to set something, like I was the one making those decisions, which I was okay with, but it just got to a point where it's like, man, I would love to bounce this idea off of somebody else. And so that was the big thing about coming to Slalom too, is just having a team of, we've got our team's channel with 14,000 consultants in it. Hey, has anybody ever done a CPQ integration with Zora through Zapier? Somebody will respond. Great, let's set some time up. And like just being able to tap into resources like that, honestly, for me at my stage in my career, it was amazing. It was what I needed. But yeah, those are some of the things to think about.
So in freelance, for everybody listening, since they're trying to get into it, it's from what you've described, and I would say my own experience too, you tend to usually get those small business, maybe mid-market range. And small business can be, was it in your experience, stuff like spinning up Salesforce, like they're brand new and you're spinning it up and you're teaching them everything about Salesforce as well. And it's like, this is also like why we use it. This is why it's important. You're kind of trying to be a champion. Did you have a lot of those experiences?
Not even yet.
Okay.
I would even say it's a step prior to that. Like in a lot of cases, like one of the key things in any project is an executive sponsor on the client side that understands the need for that. And in a lot of cases, it was almost like I was in a persuasion role where I had to convince them, like maybe one person on that client team, like the CIO, let's say, or maybe even the CFO who did it for financial reasons, is the one who said, okay, we're going to do Salesforce. And everybody else has to fall in line. And now you as the consultant, your job is to convince all of them that that was the right decision. And it's like, well, that's, again, it's a different job. Like that's not necessarily just like Salesforce admin stuff. Yeah. So yeah, it can, that's what I mean. Everything, it is people management. Like at the end of the day, if you can't manage people, you're going to probably struggle. Unless you can find a team where they're just like, go stay in your room and we'll send you tasks. But yeah, it really does just come down to managing people.
Yeah, I like that. I've had the luxury so far of not really having to do a ton of those conversations, but I would say this week I got roasted on one of them doing that same thing where it was like I'd already worked with them for a little bit, but it was that same situation. He was wanting to do Salesforce, has limited knowledge of what to do. And then I had to meet with like the actual business owner, and then he was just like super stoic, had no interest in doing anything Salesforce related, had like no idea really like why it was like such a big point to have it in their company in the first place. So it's like now this conversation isn't even about like my skills really. This is about like trying to explain what Salesforce is and like why this would be a good idea for your company. So totally agree with that one. Those can be definitely difficult. As you've moved into Slalom though, what kind of differences for people listening have they been? So you had like these smaller ones come through. What is it now when you say they're bigger scale? Like, what does that mean? What kind of projects do you work on now?
So like, I probably can't say clients, but well, my first project, I got to build a chat bot for one of the credit bureaus. Just say it that way, right? So they wanted to say, if you wanted to go in and check your credit score and we're offline, chatbot to do that. So I got to build that out, right? And that we rolled that out in like 8 countries. So they had call centers in all around the world. So that was just like really cool. I never would have been able to do that had I not come to Slalom. That was the first project. Second project, I worked at Meta, right? So I'm working with Facebook. I probably shouldn't have said that. But it doesn't matter. They know we've got stories that we're publicly partners there, right? But we did a project there. So we're also doing things on large scale. So it was helping one of their like research teams with one of their very, very specific operation like processes, very, very specific part of it. But it also had large scale. Like we were able to test that out and just bigger, just bigger. I think about impact. Like I like to do projects that actually impact and make change. I guess not so much with that one, but you get used to it. You kind of have to get like a couple reps at that too. Like working with Special Olympics helped me a lot because we just had data from all around the world. But it can be intimidating when you're the person that's in charge of like a company's data, right? You kind of do need a couple like practice rounds to get up to that point. But we got to do that with Meta. And then, okay, this is a great example for this scenario, for this group, right? So one of my dev orgs that I created before I even got the Slalom was for like large scale events. So I did the Special Olympics, World Games. And so I was like, if I ever get a chance to do another large scale event, any Olympics, Paralympics, X Games, anything like that, I'm going to try and sell them on this demo org that I built out based on my experience. Got a chance to show that internally to some of our media and entertainment people. One of them had just come from a golf tournament, saw like, hey, this golf tournament had a technological need. Could you do anything for this? We ended up meeting it up, made some tweaks to the dev org. 9 months later, we actually had a project. So we actually, the official events app for Special Olympics Florida, they do a Disney golf tournament every year, is run through Salesforce, right? Powered by Slalom. So like I was able, that literally came from a dev org. I have 50 dev orgs. One of them turned into an actual project, right? And then what am I working on now? Oh yeah, now I'm doing a really cool project on a retail store with 200 stores around the country. And they have this process where when you come in, you go through an evaluation. They put you through this, scanning device, not a device, but like they have these metrics that they measure, and then they can go find products that match your measurements, right? And so we're building out their whole tablet process. So like when someone walks into the store, they have an appointment, we are designing, okay, how do I know who this person is? Do we create a new lead or do we find an existing one? Do we need to convert them to an opportunity when they ask for price, or when like all this stuff through talk tracks, all that stuff. So just being able to have impact, and like I'm gonna go to my local store as a secret shopper and like test this out. Like I think that's just fun. Just don't get a chance to do projects like that a lot of times on the smaller scale.
Cool.
So you were asking about the bigger teams. The other thing that I'll say, and this is a skill that I think is going to be very important and it's not talked about enough, is change management. So a lot of times, especially with bigger programs, when you roll out Salesforce, it's literally, I know it sounds like a confusing term, I didn't know what it meant at first. How are you managing the change? So people are used to doing their jobs this way today. Monday, you're going to expect them to do it this way. How are they being told? Do they have a chance to see it ahead of time? Do they have a chance to check in and like play around? Do they have a way to ask questions? How are they going to be measured? When are you going to turn off the old way? Is there a way to go back to the old way if they get confused? Like all of that is very strategic, including communication plans and training documents, and all of that stuff is probably the most critical part. Like programs fail because of change management. You can build a dope system, but if you can't effectively implement that with the people, not just like the technology, but like actually get the people who need to use it and want to use it, then the project is not successful. So for those of you looking for a certain track, that is also a track in Salesforce. Is even if it's just like, okay, if I want to move you over from looking at doing everything in Excel to now I want you to move it over to Jira. Someone has to explain the steps and get them to understand that. That's an incredibly valuable skill, even if you don't know Salesforce. Just being able to manage that. Big projects at Slalom, we always have a change management resource. There's always a person who's in charge of just managing that. And all they do is keep our training docs up to date and communication plans, like I said, all that stuff. That's probably one of the biggest advantages to being with a larger firm, is just having the resources that can really focus. Like I said, they focus in on every little piece of the project. Like there's a person who just manages change, which sounds crazy, but it's so nice. So I will throw that out there too. If you have an opportunity, if you're looking for like jobs or keywords that might like resonate, I would say that change management is one I would add in there, because it's everything needs it. Everyone wants to evolve their tech stack. Everyone wants to move into the 21st century or whatever. And someone's going to have to manage. How do we keep changing this without losing efficiency?
Yeah, and that's huge. I subcontract with a couple people, and so I've worked with some bigger, like big name clients as well, being on some of their projects. And I would also say, I mean, like when they're spending the money that they do, the level that they operate at, as far as financial goes and like their status as a company, like that kind of stuff is like an expectation too, that would be very difficult to fulfill as a solo person, right? Because it is so detailed. It's like down to the exact hour and half hour, what we're scoping out and what's going to happen when we push that through and it gets deployed and what, like you
And
said, what
deployment
happens
plans,
in,
all that stuff.
all of it.
Yep.
So I think that's super key too. I like that. You also pointed out that that's also another place that you could kind of get your foot in the door in case, you know, if you don't love doing all the Salesforce building, like that's another one that's really cool where you have enough knowledge around Salesforce, but you could kind of fit into that role where you're helping out with that. So
you can start there and like wiggle your way into admin. If you can't get the admin gig, see if there's a change management gig, learn that way, right?
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's untapped.
I know we're at time now, but I wanted to make sure we got to your business side of things. And also, we always love to know how we can support you going forward and like products you might have or places we can join up on or places we should follow you at. Do you want to take some time as much as you would like to break that down for us?
Sure, I'll do that pretty quick. So I have a company called the Salesforce Anchor, like I mentioned before. Quick backstory, like I said, I played college football, didn't have a business background. When I stumbled into Salesforce, the only like organizational structure that I knew was the Dartmouth College Athletic Program. Like I knew enough about how that works. So I built that in my dev org and I would teach myself. I'll say, okay, well, you know, Bill's in marketing, and when he's done with the copy for the program for the Saturday game, it's got to go to Cindy and sports information. Okay, how would I do that? They need to have different people. They got to have different profiles. They need to have different access. He can create, she can approve. All right, I'm just using these scenarios to go find out how to build stuff and like researching. So basically now that has turned into the Salesforce Anchor. So instead of just using that scenario, we use all kinds of different scenarios. Well, I shouldn't say all the times. We've got 10 different courses now. There's a couple more that are coming out throughout the rest of this year. But like I said, we did do one for college athletics. We did one around Ted Lasso, where we build out some more professional athletics and sponsorships and tracking venue management and uniforms. We built one around Schitt's Creek, where we track the Rosebud Motel on Service Cloud and the Rose Apothecary on Sales Cloud. We did one for veterans. So for any veterans, if we got any military families, for people who have ever requested leave from the military or have had to change bases, there's a process every military family goes through that's called a PCS process. We built that out in Service Cloud so we can track that process and all the way through creating an Experience Cloud portal where the spouses can check in on the request and see how things are going, because a lot of times the spouses don't know until they show up at the train station sometimes. So just like things like that, like everyday scenarios that things that everyone knows. Abbott Elementary is probably the best example. Everyone's either been a student at a school, or some people have worked in schools, or your kids are in school, or like everyone knows about how that works. So we basically use the structure of teachers, parents, and students to teach contact record types, right? And then we've got a class schedule, you've got grades, you've got report cards, right? The grades are a child of the report card. The grade relates, so we just kind of talk through how do you think through Salesforce, but we use a scenario that you're already anchored in. So all of those are available at the salesforceanchor.com. I can post a link here. And those are all available. The goal for that is to be affordable. So I know there's a lot of programs out there where you can get this hands-on experience, but one, you either have to pay like several $1,000s, or you have to wait. Like there's just small lists of people that get accepted, and you may have to wait several months. In the meantime, if you don't want to wait, you can do these types of courses. So you basically enroll in the course, you get access to it for a whole year. You can see the recording where I'm building out a lot of the stuff live, along with screenshots of certain things along the way. And so you then can build your own dev org. So you just set it up with what you know, and maybe you want to build it for your team, right? Or maybe you want to build it around how your class or your kid's school goes, right? But what's nice is that it gives you your data. You've got all of the fake data that you need to figure out the scenario. If you don't, you can watch an episode of Schitt's Creek. Just what 22 minutes of watching, and now you can say, okay, cool, let's just use that. How would we prevent this rash from happening? Okay, now there's a case. You got a case process, and it's related to the vendor. The account is the vendor, and now the product is the product that you, right? So you just kind of figure out how to tie those things all together. And that's what we do. So again, you can go to that link. We've also now got a membership, the Anchor Club membership, where you can get access to everything for the next year, everything that's there now and everything that will come out. So the next wave, we're going to do wedding planning. So I actually planned my whole wedding on Salesforce using campaigns. That's a true story. Also airport logistics. So I did a program for Amazon Air about a year and a half ago. Oh, I didn't mention that. I did that at Slalom too. That was my second project. Yeah, dope project. That's to pretty much build out Amazon's operational system at all of their, mainly at the Cincinnati hub, but at all of the different airports that use Amazon airplanes, they log everything in Salesforce. So if a plane is late, then they want to know why, you have to put it in the Salesforce org. Super cool org, actually. It won the Salesforce Innovation Award in 2020. So we're doing that. We've also got one on private detectives. So I haven't figured out which show I'm going to use for that yet. But there's a lot of stuff around accountability amongst law enforcement, which pretty much comes down to case management. So having ways for people to track just different cases and issues. It's a big thing that seems to be coming out of like county and state level, just different agencies. So we're going to build some stuff out there. And I think there's 2 or 3 more that I can't think of yet that aren't yet. Oh, creative writing. All of my writing projects, I build them in Salesforce. So I've got an object for show, I got an object for episode and characters. And like at one point when I was doing another fictional show, I would tie that with actors. So I would say, I want to go talk to this person's agent, and I would actually track their agent as well as another contact, and email to like all this stuff in Salesforce. So the point of that all being, you can join as the Anchor Club as a member, and you'll have access to all of those for a year. And also a part of that, we do ask that you create me as a user in your org. When you create, your org, that lets me log in and see. So I can see if I'm teaching okay. I can see if there's something that you're not doing well. I can see if you've taken a different path just based on something that you might know or your experience, that I can then help you on and say, oh, like highlight this, or like put this higher, or whatever that might be. Like I want to try and help people build these out, because these ultimately are your portfolio. Like you want to have these in your back pocket. So when you go into an interview or when you send out your resume, you can link to this somehow, or at least speak to it. And that's the third part of the program. So once I can log in and see it, I have this little review process I go through, and then we meet and we'll talk through it, and you'll get a chance to explain to me what the impact of the system is. Because that's really what the goal is to show, like, not just that you can build, but that you can show a recruiter that you can build and make an impact, like hopefully immediately. So that's the Anchor. I invite everyone to take a look at it. If you're not following me on LinkedIn, definitely follow. You can ask questions. I'm usually pretty quick about responding. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Yeah, I put all 3 of those links in there as we were talking, as well as your LinkedIn when we first kicked this off.
Dope.
So we should all have it in there. But what we always do after this too is we kind of just do like a recap. As you know, we're recording. So this will go to YouTube. We put it in like all the details there so people can see it. And then in our community as well. We have a few more people, obviously, in our community. We're just spread out amongst all these different time zones. So it's always hard to kind of find everybody to get into these live calls. But everybody does go back and watch it pretty frequently. And we'll make sure that gets out to them as well. Outside of that, I just want to say thank you for everybody's participation tonight. Great questions. And Kyle, thank you again for making time tonight for us. Come over and give us more background about consulting, freelancing, your journey, telling us about your business that you're running now with Salesforce Anchor and those links to the courses. I think those are super helpful as far as when it comes to building out portfolios, like you said. That's like the bread and butter right there, is when you get into those calls, knowing exactly how you would actually speak to something realistic of, hey, this is actually how I built something out. So awesome to see you charging the front on all of that. Other than that, we'll get this posted to YouTube, and appreciate everybody's time tonight. You guys all have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Jordan.